15 minutes to get here.
Good morning. Welcome to Back Talk. We are talking about how to help our kids be successful as they launch specifically into college today. I have my guest with me, January Wuerth. I'm your host, Melissa Corkum. I blog and parent coach at thecorkboardonline.com. And here at Back Talk, we're really love having guests that have something to share that helps parents just kind of think differently, kind of expands our horizons. So January, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what are some of the experiences that drew you to even this field? Like when I was in college, I don't think such a thing existed as a student success coach. There wasn't really anyone out there helping families or students navigate this transition.
I got drawn to this experience because when I was in college, I studied abroad and I had a life-changing experience, and I wanted to help other people have a similar experience. So I was very fortunate that very shortly after graduating, I had an opportunity to work with students at the University of Pennsylvania and help them study abroad. And I did that for almost a decade. And I really enjoyed getting to know the students and preparing them to study abroad and think about not only the fun that they were going to have, but all the little details that needed to take place beforehand and while they were away so they'd be successful. And then after a while, I kind of felt like I wanted a more engaging relationship with the students because I'd get the students all prepared to go abroad, and then I would only hear from them if they had a crisis,
a problem.
And then they'd come back and they'd be like, I had a great time. And so I transitioned into a different role where I met with prospective students interested in a specific program at the University of Pennsylvania where they studied business and engineering. I used to joke and say I worked with like little Steve Jobs and Bill Gates because they did engineering and business in 4 years' time. And so that was a very challenging thing to do in 4 years. So I not only got to meet them when they were hopeful applicants, but I also got to advise them and help them navigate the stresses of taking more courses than an average student and networking and applying for internships and then working with them and getting to see them a little bit as young alumni and then getting married and having kids. So it was very rewarding for me. And that's kind of when I stepped away from working at a physical university, I said, what did I like most about my experience there? Because I wore several hats, and my favorite part was working with the students and watching them come in so excited and grow and develop and see how their path changed as they
realized taking on 2 majors in 4 years was
right.
a terrible idea.
Not a terrible idea.
No,
like some of them really liked it and did really well with it. And other students came in and said, what, I think I really want to focus on business. And it was hard for them to come to that conclusion. But as time went on, I think they were really happy with their decision. And I always told students, when you get to college, we used to make a 4-year plan, and I'd do it with pencil and a blank piece of paper, and I'd make a big deal about it because I had students come to me and say, I have to talk to you about something really difficult. And I'd say, what is it? And they'd say, I think I want to change my plan. And I was like, remember when I said we're going to do this with pencil and paper because it's flexible? Because in high school, there's limited opportunities to expose students to certain subjects because of funding or whatever it might be, or resources. And I think in college, there's such a broad array of things that students can study.
Like 150 majors
and
or
it's
more.
So hard to narrow it down. And I think when you come in and you're so focused that I'm going to do this, and then you're introduced to something else that piques your interest that you've never had access to before, it's okay to try that out a little bit. And I think there's so much pressure with students going to college these days. It's helpful to have somebody on your side to say, what? You're here for 4 years. It's okay if you take a course that you think might be interesting to you. We can see how it fits in and fulfills requirements.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I was such a rule follower and a inside the box and a type A. Like I went in thinking that like once I had to choose it and I had to stick with it. Mm-hmm. So I can totally relate to that. So okay, so there's that like perfectionism kind of, I'm stuck if I come in. What are some of the other challenges you see as students transition from high school into college? You were mentioning like even just the amount of opportunities is drastically different, depending on your high school experience and which college you go to, but most likely they're is so much more independent, so much more choice. So what other difficulties do you see students navigating as they're transitioning?
I think choice is a big thing. I think time management is a big thing because I think in high school it's so regimented. I also think independence and planning your day. I think as parents, it's hard not to help your kids by getting them up early in the morning and telling them, it's time to do your homework and kind of micromanaging their lives because you want them to be successful. But I've had so many college students. I had this one college student who he kept he could not get up on time. He purchased a moving alarm clock because he kept turning the alarm off and going back to sleep. And I think, I know rest is really important and we want our students to get as much rest as possible. But I think once your child is in high school, you really need to start saying, you need to get yourself up. You need to think about packing your own lunch, even though that's a nice thing to do for your child. And but these are skills that they need to start developing and practicing in high school so that in college they'll be able to get themselves up in the morning and get to class on time and prioritize breakfast, lunch, and dinner and going to bed on time so that they can do these things for themselves. I think another big thing that I think is really important for parents to talk to students about, college is so expensive and students know that. And I think students put a lot of pressure on themselves to do really well at college because they know the investment that their parents are making in them. And sometimes when they have a little problem in college that could easily be fixed if they talk to somebody about it, they're afraid to talk to somebody about it because they think, I'm independent now, I should be able to solve this problem on my own. And they can't, or they don't, or they make a wrong decision, and then the problem becomes ginormous. I used to tell my college students, I'm really good at solving tiny problems, but if you wait until your problem's really big, it's going to take a while for us to solve it. So I think, talking to your students in high school about, the highs and lows of your day so they know that you encounter small problems every day and talk about how you try and fix them, I think that's really important. Another thing that I didn't experience when I was in college, and I'm not sure if you did. When I went to college, it was really important to connect with people, and it still is today. And when I went to college, you went and you joined clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a club fair usually in the first couple weeks, and we all joined probably more clubs than we should have.
And you could pull back, it wasn't a big deal. Nowadays, there's a lot of universities where you have to interview to be a part of clubs and send in a resume. And I worked with so many students who were president of their class or president of student government and very accomplished people. And they came and they were all excited to join clubs and societies, and they'd be in my office at the end of September or beginning of October, in tears. And I was like, what's going on? And they were like, I didn't get into any clubs. How am I supposed to make friends? So I think that's a little bit of a question that parents and students should be asking when they visit universities. How do people connect with each other? Is it easy to get into clubs and societies? And are some clubs easier to get into than others? And kind of take those routes? Because it is a little bit different, and I think with social media, you see all your friends at other schools joining clubs and having fun, and you're like, I can't even get into a club. What am I doing wrong? And you're not doing anything wrong. It's just the landscape has changed, and you might have put all your resources in one boat for one club when there's other clubs that are more welcoming than, the one club that everybody said you had to get into.
Man, I had no idea. Gosh,
I know, it's so different. I
just remember showing up at the quad and playing ultimate frisbee with whatever that club was,
Ultimate frisbee has 5 hours of practice a week at least. Some schools it has multiple hours of practice a day. Because I was always like, what about ultimate frisbee? Because when I was in college, everybody loved ultimate frisbee, and they were like, do you know how much you have to practice to be in ultimate frisbee? And I was like, I didn't realize it was such a serious time commitment. And I think it's just so funny for those of us who went to college before 2000. It's a completely different experience now than it was. And I think for most of the parents who are sending students to college, that was our experience, and we're just not aware of this new landscape.
Oh yeah, no, I played floor hockey, interim floor hockey, which was such a joke. I was not an athlete in high school, and I got recruited because at my school, and this is so probably, pre-2000, right? If a girl scored, it was worth 2 points.
Oh.
but if a boy scored, it was only
opposed to a
worth
boy.
one.
Yeah.
So they would recruit us poor girls and just put us up front in front of the goal and hope that
Yeah.
we would touch the ball before it rolled in
Yeah.
because we were valuable for that. And there was definitely no application involved because if I would have had to practice or try out for such a thing, there's no way they would have let me on the court.
Yep. And I think that's another thing, like for people who are athletes, if they get to college and for some reason they get injured or it doesn't work out how they had planned, it can be kind of like altering to who they think they are because now I'm not an athlete. So now who am I here?
Identity.
And who's my peer group? Because I thought I was going to join the track team or the swim team or whatever it was. And now I'm not really a part of that group because I got injured or I got cut from the team early on. So there's a lot of things to kind of consider. And I think it's really important to talk to your kids about what they think college is going to be like and what your experience was like. And as early as you can start talking to them about what they're looking for in a college and what they want the experience to be like, and identifying their strengths and their weaknesses so you can find colleges that provide support for their areas where they might need a little bit more accommodation, I think it's so important.
Yeah, so with that, because now we know that there's all these other ways that we can fail when we go to college, like not getting into the right club.
Right.
How do we how do we foster emotional resilience and prep our kids coming into this experience for these extra areas? I mean, that wasn't even like a thing when we were in school that we could even like we just had to worry about getting good grades.
Right.
Right. So now there's all these other things, and I imagine there's like higher stakes for internships and co-ops and all these things. So what's the emotional resilience piece? And I imagine it probably has to start before they turn 18 and walk off to school.
Yes, I think you really need to work on emotional resilience in high school. And I think having conversations with your students, as I mentioned, about things that didn't go right for you or things that you're struggling with kind of normalizes those struggles. I think it's also fantastic if you have a family member or a close family friend who's slightly older than your student, who they can talk to about struggles or experiences. I was really fortunate. I swam when I was in college, and I had this ahead of his time swim coach, I would say. He was very interested in psychology, and I remember being a freshman, and he talked about struggling with anxiety or being overwhelmed or stressed, and he had one of the captains on the swim team say to us, is there anyone here who's gone to counseling and would be comfortable speaking about why they went and how it helped them? And one of the seniors, one of the coaches, got up and said, I went, I was struggling with X, Y, and Z. She didn't really give great detail, but that normalized it. So if anybody else was overwhelmed or struggling, I think it made it easier for people to go. When I first started working at Penn, I talked to all the students and I said to them, what would make this better for you? And we had all the women in the program that I worked with, because there weren't as many women as men in my program for a number of different reasons, talk about especially the upperclassmen, how they felt as freshmen and things that they had concerns about that they didn't want to share with anybody because they thought it was just them. And that really blossomed into this nice group experience where people said, I feel that way too. Yeah, me too. And I think a lot of universities are doing great things with internships now, as you mentioned, like the stress related to that. Some schools have like a failure wall. So like, these are all the rejection letters I got, because I think we only hear about the successes. And there's a lot of missteps and pivots along the way to success. And I think that these are things that we have to talk about as parents and as people who are mentors to younger people, so they don't think every day I'm going to hit it out of the park. And I used to be involved in admissions at Penn, and I always wanted to add an essay question about resilience. So tell me about a time you failed. Because everybody on this planet has failed, and we've all picked ourselves back up. And if you can go into college thinking about the time where you failed and you picked yourself back up, when you have a small misstep at college and things didn't go as you had planned, it's easier to say, I've been here before and I know how to pick myself up. So I think things like that, like talking about it, making it normal, it's really, really important. And talking about how you handle missteps and disappointments, because it's not the end of the world.
I love that. Well, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and pick up where we left off, talking a little bit more about resilience, and then talking about some practical things that we can be doing as we prep our kids to move to the next stage. So we'll be right back.
I work 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. So when I'm off the clock, I gotta get stuff done. So when I need a snack, I need something healthy, tasty, and easy to eat. Like wonderful pistachios without the shells. They're protein-powered, delicious, and great on the go. And that's perfect for me. Thanks, Liz. A woman without a lot of time.
Whether you're a gourmet cook or just want to eat like one, visit Rostelli Market Fresh, your home for the freshest, locally sourced ingredients to please everyone who loves great food. Our organic meats, quality seafood, and free-range poultry are cut fresh to order. Chefs create culinary-inspired prep foods made fresh every day, which pair nicely with our vast selection of fine wines and spirits. Choose from handmade pastas, artisan cheeses, organic produce, and grocery items, all from the finest purveyors. Rostelli Market Fresh, from our family.
Welcome back. So we left off talking about emotional resilience as our kids are getting ready to transition to college. And we ended up talking about failure and a little bit about failure. And this is such an interesting topic to me. One, because, like I said, I was a perfectionist, and literally the idea of failing, like I thought it might kill me. Like when I was growing up, that was the thing. And not even for fault of my parents. They're pretty laid back and low key. A lot of it was self-imposed. I think it's a personality thing for a lot of us. At the same time, like our kids are in high school, we're trying to make sure that they're not lazy and watching TV all day and streaming Netflix. We want them to apply themselves. Yes. We're thinking about college, we're thinking about college applications, we're thinking about transcripts. So we're holding a high bar in some regards. You know, parents these days, and this was not a thing when we were in school, right? But parents can check grades online at like the click of a button. We talked a little bit about micromanaging and about how some of that's going on. So how do we balance this idea where we want to raise the bar for our kids, we want to call them to success, but we don't want them to feel like failure is the end of the world?
As a parent, I think about these things all the time myself, and I think about them with my students. I think failure is a big thing, and I think, you know, especially for students who are type A and who've done really well in high school, failure to them can mean I got my first B. Yeah. Like I failed,
that was
I failed the exam. And I had this wonderful professor in college, and I went to a small liberal arts school where there were a lot of small assessments throughout the semester, so it wasn't like this midterm is 50% of your grade and this final is 50% of your grade. And at some schools it is like that. And this one class, that's how the class was run. And the class before the midterm, which all of us were completely stressed out about, my professor like bebopped into the classroom. He drew this big circle on the board and he looked at all of us and we were like, what's he gonna say? And he took the chalk and he put a small dot in the middle of this giant circle. And he turned to us and he said, you know, this circle is your life. And this midterm exam is this teeny tiny dot. It's not gonna make you or break you. And I think, you know, when you're in the moment in college and you feel all this stress and pressure and you wanna do really well, you wanna do well for yourself, you wanna do well for your parents, and you have this image of yourself that I'm an A student, I think that's stressful. And I think as parents, and to help our students with that, we need to talk to them about, you know, these are our expectations of college and this is how it's going to be different. It's going to be a different learning environment. You have to make new friends. You got to figure out where to go to do your laundry and all these things that you never had to do before. So let's think about the first semester and our expectations for that. What are your expectations for that? What are my expectations for that? And I worked with these really high-level students, and I had this one student, I wish like I had gotten this moment on video, and I used to tell all the students during new student orientation, you guys are the A students, you're very successful, and you guys were the tutors in high school. College is a different place, and you don't know what this environment's gonna be like, and one class is gonna be different than the other with expectations from professors and how they're gonna run the class. If you have any inkling that you think you might need greater assistance in a class, get a tutor during the first week of school. Because if you wait till the first assessment and you get that B, which you now think is an F, and you try and go get the tutors, they're gonna be all taken. And I used to say to the students, I try to frame it a little bit differently. Why not go and get a tutor at the start of the semester so you can easily get an A instead of struggling to get a C or a B? And you can go and get the name of the tutor and put it in your back pocket. You might never have to use that tutor. But if you do need to get the tutor, that resource is available to you. And I think the other thing that's really important and would be helpful to parents, I think, is during new student orientation, and they do new student orientation for parents now, like it's a whole separate thing that they didn't have when we were in college. Your students are getting so much information about all the support and accommodations available at university, which is wonderful that the university provides this time and this information and this type of support. But honestly, I think college students are thinking about like their dorm room, is it set up how they want it to be? Who's going to be their friends? What are their other friends doing? Their parents are going to leave.
Clubs did we not get into?
Exactly. Like their mind is being torn in all these different directions. So I think as parents to be present and to know your child and know your child's strengths, know your child's weaknesses, to, keep in mind what resources are available. So if you're checking in with your student, on a weekly basis, or when you sit down with them and discuss how often you're going to check in, and you ask them questions about, are you going to class? How are the classes going? Are you joining clubs? Are you making friends? Are you struggling with anything? You'll know in advance what support is available for your student in case they don't know who to talk to and where to go. Instead of them coming to you with this problem that they've probably sat on for a while and dumping it on you, and then you spending like an hour to 2 hours on the website of the university trying to figure out what resources there are. Those are kind of my suggestions.
Good. So at what point does one need a student success coach? Where is the perfect place for you to come in and help on top of or in complement with whatever the university may already be offering?
I think a lot of students benefit from a student success coach. I used to start working with my university students in June or July, and I'd spend about 2 hours with them either in person or normally via Skype or something, FaceTime like that, with them kind of talking about, what you need to think about as you get ready to go to school. We'd look at their schedule, what their plan is. I called it throwing everything at the wall. So tell me, like, if you could go to school and do everything you wanted and take every class you wanted, let's throw it at the wall and see what that looks like. And again, this is a temporary plan, and we can make changes to it. We talk about things like, do you want to study abroad? And if so, when do you want to start thinking about that? What do you think you want your major to be? Why? What were you really good at high school? What were your study habits that really worked for you? Things along those lines to kind of get to know the student a little better and set up a trusting relationship with them so that when they got to college and, the excitement of college, which also kind of has this flip side of anxiety because there's so many unknowns, I would talk to them about that as well. That they'd feel comfortable talking to me, and then I would kind of check in with them on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis to kind of go over like time management, how is that going? Because some people get to college and they're not used to planning their day, and Netflix becomes a real problem, and like dealing with things like that. And I think, as a parent, you really want to help your child. I grew up as a swimmer, and I would love to teach my daughter how to swim, but she doesn't want to learn how to swim for me. So I think sometimes it's nice to have a mentor for your child who there's no strings attached.
Yeah,
so
no attachment, no complicated attachment.
I haven't known you since birth. I'm not paying your tuition. You can come to me and say, I made a mistake. And I can say, oh, we all make mistakes. So I think starting with right before students go to college is really helpful because then we can establish a strong base. But I've helped students all the way up until senior year who, were working with somebody at their university who left, and now they kind of feel lost, and it's the final year. And so I've come in at that point, and we're talking about finishing strong, finding career opportunities and different ways to go about doing that. I think each year of college presents its own challenge. Personally, I think the sophomore year is the hardest because I think that's when people really kind of like dig in and kind of front load things so that the junior and senior year can be easier and they can focus on internships and recruiting opportunities. But the other challenging thing of the sophomore year is it's not new, it's not exciting anymore, but you're still taking some introductory courses. So there's nothing like flashy or sexy about sophomore year.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of work. I used to tell my sophomores, like, in my mind, this year is like you as Charlie Brown, like trudging uphill with like bad weather coming at you. So checking in with people around that time. I think junior year is challenging because of the internships and all the stress going on with that. And then senior year, you know, it's transitioning into the real world, and what does that mean and what does that look like, and I just got comfortable here. So I think you could have a student success coach at any point in your career. Oftentimes it's like healthy eating. Eat healthy to begin with so you don't get sick in the end, and then kind of have to come in and kind of rearrange your plan on how to manage your health. I think starting strong so that you encounter fewer problems as you go along is helpful.
Well, those are good words. You're kind of like the guidance counselor you can start while your kid's in high school that kind of goes through, right? Because you can't access all those resources at college in May, June, and July like you're talking about necessarily.
Yeah.
You have to kind of wait to get on campus. So thank you so much. We had some questions from the community we didn't even get to. I'm sure parents have a lot of other questions. How can they get in touch with you if they have other questions or if they want to look into getting a student success coach for their child?
I have a website called universitylifecoaching.com, or if you Google my name, I come up on January Wuerth. I also post Thriving Thursday posts each week and Sunday Strong posts, and right now I'm kind of focusing on dealing with like stress and anxiety at the end of the semester, so defining what that means and giving people coping tips to try and figure out how to get through this next 2 weeks of high intense assessments. But yeah, and on my website there's an email address and a phone number, and just so you know, to make sure that I'm a compatible fit with you and your student, I offer a 45-minute free session to talk to the student, and if the student wants the parents to be involved as well, they can. And then if it's a good fit and the student feels like I could be beneficial to them, the rest of our sessions will be one-on-one with the student, either in person if you're in the Philadelphia area where I'm located, or we do telephone or video chats as well.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for being here and for bringing all of your college experience. You know, it's been a long time since I've been in college, and so I had no idea. So it was really helpful for me as well. It was so great to have you.